Welcome to Destiny by Design. This is Learn to Trust the Truth, Part 2. And in this one, we're going to be talking about being lied to and avoiding deception. Because if you're going to fulfill your destiny, something that is certain is that the enemy is going to send people to try to deceive you, send people to try to sidetrack you, send people to discourage you. But whatever it is, whether they're trying to discourage you, whether they're trying to oppose you, one way or another, they're going to be trying to lie to you or pull the wool over your eyes in some way, shape, or form. And let's face it, we don't like to be lied to, at least most of us don't. Especially in business matters or things that are very serious, we want people to tell us the truth, or at least we should. Some of us don't, but that's another issue. And having been deceived can have very disastrous consequences for us. Not just for us, but for our families, for our ministries, for our businesses, our jobs, so on and so forth. But the truth is, deception is always a cooperative act. Now, let me clarify that. At some point, in some way, shape, or form, you have to want to be deceived. Hey there, Tracy, good to see you. God bless you. But deception is always a cooperative act. On some level, you have to want to be deceived. Not necessarily directly wanting to be deceived, but I'll put it this way. In order to deceive you, the person trying to deceive you has to at least appear to have what you think you want. Henry Oberlander, who is considered one of the greatest con men in modern history, pulled off a big banking scheme that they thought was a threat to the American banking system. And he's believed to have said, when he was interrogated, that everyone is willing to give you something for whatever they're hungry for. As he put, I think the exact words were, people will give you anything if you know what they're hungry for. And this is a key thing to understand about yourself in learning to trust the truth. You got to understand what you're hungry for, because the enemy will use what you're hungry for to get to you. He will use what you're hungry for to manipulate you. He'll use it to deceive you. He'll use it to trap you. He'll use it to seduce you, because let's face it, nobody ever gets deceived or gets seduced by something they don't want. I'm going to say that again. You can't be seduced by something you don't want. You know, I'll tell you right now, even if I wasn't saved, you know, a 5'2", 400-pound woman would have no chance of seducing me. You know why? Because I don't like that kind of woman. There are men who do. I'm not one of them. Let's put it that way. You can't be seduced by what you don't want. And as a saved man, I can't be seduced in that way anyway, regardless of what she looks like, because I'm not interested. In fact, there have been quite a few occasions which I did not realize a woman was coming on to me. I didn't even realize, it didn't even occur to me, because my mind ain't even there. Told my wife about the conversation. She said, oh no, she was coming on to you. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, she was. But I had no clue, and that must have been very frustrating for those women. But anyhow, Psalm 51 verse 6 says, behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part you shall make me to know wisdom. And here's the thing, deep down inside you, unless you face the truth, you can't really walk in wisdom. And like the Bible says, wisdom is the principal thing. Above all, get wisdom. And in all you're getting, get understanding. Without wisdom and understanding, you're not going to accomplish your destiny. So you have to avoid deception. Remember what I said before last week, that we use the truth to make our decision, or what we think is the truth. Trust is always based on belief. So a big part of being deceived is understanding what you're hungry for, of not being deceived rather, is understanding what you're hungry for. Since that's probably going to be the very thing that a liar is going to use to try to deceive you. Now, some of you may be thinking that this could take a negative turn. So let's consider the possibility that even the worst person that you could possibly run into could possibly help you, despite their best efforts to do otherwise. At the very least, you may be able to glean from your dealings with them a close study of human nature, and therefore thereby become better equipped to protect yourselves and others from the predations of deceitful individuals and organizations. That being said, I'm going to lay out some guidelines for you. They're not by no means all inclusive, but they should prove to be helpful. We're going to talk about what I call Brother Sam's lie detection secrets. There's some things that will show you that people are lying to you, and sometimes you can see this by the Spirit of God. Sometimes you're not. So for those times where God isn't directly showing you, I'm going to give you some things that are going to help you determine whether a person is either lying to you or operating in deception. One of them is their body language. Now, something very typical to liars, and not all liars do this. The best liars can kind of control this to some extent, but a lot of them still do things and don't realize they're doing them. Most liars are going to stiffen up their body language. Their body language is going to be very closed. They may avoid eye contact. Their hand, arm, and leg movement is going to go toward the body as they try to take up less space. It's a subconscious thing that people do because it's almost like an animal thing that people do, where they're trying to take up less space to be less noticeable to predators. It's almost like that kind of thing where an animal hides. Liars do the same thing. They tend to slouch if they're being interrogated. And if you don't believe me, watch the first 48 sometime. If that TV show is still on, you can watch it on YouTube anyway. Where they investigate serious crimes, usually like homicides and things like that. When they're interrogating somebody, when the person's lying, there's some things that they're going to do with their body language. Their body language would be more closed. It's not open, and they won't even notice they're doing it. But liars, if you're really putting them to the test, if you're really interrogating them, they will point their feet toward the nearest exit, and they don't even realize they're doing it. It's like a subconscious thing. They won't even realize. Most of them will not realize that they're doing it. That's one of the key cues. Another thing you'll notice when people are and you can watch videos of police interrogations and you'll see that I'm right about this. A liar, if the police will offer you, I'm using a little container of paint for my next painting. They'll offer you a coffee or a drink of water. They're not doing this out of kindness. No. The reason the police will offer you something to drink is to see what you do with it. See, a truthful person will not put it directly in front of them. A truthful person will put it off to the side. They might take a sip, but they put it to the side. Because a truthful person is open. They don't even realize they're doing this. They don't want a barrier between them and the other person because they want to get to the truth. Whereas a liar subconsciously wants a barrier between you and them. They will put their drink right in front of them. They don't even realize they're doing it. Now, not everybody that does that is necessarily lying, but when you start seeing these behaviors in clusters, the probability that they're lying is very high. For example, if they've got closed body language, they're avoiding eye contact, their feet are pointed toward the nearest exit and they don't even notice it, they put their drink directly in front of them, between you and them, these are really bad signs. The probability is very, very high. The other thing with liars will touch their face, throat, and mouth much more frequently than truthful people. They may scratch their nose, behind their ear, their nape, or their neck as they speak deceitfully. They do this while they're talking, and they do it often. They're also likely to touch their chest with an open hand as they say something that isn't true. Now, some of this happens because they're actively trying to control their body language so as not to give themselves away. Like a lot of public speakers touch their chest while they're saying something. Usually it's because they're saying something truthful. But liars will do this, and they'll do it too much. They'll keep doing that because they're trying to control their body language because they don't want to give something away. You'll see them exerting a lot more control over their movements than what is natural or normal. Emotional gestures and contradiction. The timing and duration of gestures and emotional cues will be off pace. They may be delayed, longer than natural. They may often stop suddenly. Liars often smile at inappropriate times, or they'll laugh at inappropriate times. Laugh where it doesn't make sense to laugh. I once knew a woman who would always nod very emphatically, but usually a few seconds after she lied. She'd lie and then she'd nod very emphatically. That's a little bit of a cue there, that there's something not quite right. And she would punctuate her words with some kind of expression, almost as if she realized that she needed to somehow give it some emphasis. And whenever she'd give a deceitful explanation for something that happened or something that she had done, there were always 7 words she would always say every single time. And I actually told her husband, I'm so bad. I told her husband, and I gave her tell. You know how every gambler has a tell. This was her tell. Her tell is this: if she's lying, she's going to say, yes, that's it. That's what it is. Those 7 words in that sequence, if she says that, she's lying for sure. And so sometime I might check up on him, see where that went, now that he knows when his wife is lying to him. Now, I knew this woman personally. I never called her on it once I realized it. The reason why I never called her on it is this: I wanted her to keep doing it because I wanted to make sure I knew when she was lying, so I wasn't going to tell her. That's my mother. Oh boy. Yeah, Mom, I knew you were lying the whole time. Anyhow, so, and part of it, I did find her transparent attempts to hoodwink me quite amusing. And most of us are not as mysterious as we think we are. Mom, you're not mysterious. Anyway, so likewise, you might wish to you might choose to be entertained and amused rather than frustrated or angered. Because some of us, we get really angry when people lie to us. Sometimes you might want to choose to be amused by it. Don't let it get to you. Don't let it, especially you saw right through it. Be grateful that they told on themselves without meaning to. And especially if it's a situation where it's not good for you to let on that you know. Don't get angry. Be glad that they're telling on themselves. Now, facial expressions are also a key part of this equation. A lot of times when people are lying and being deceptive, their facial expressions will often be limited to mouth movements. For example, when people smile only with their mouth, I know at the very least the smile is not genuine. You know, they'll smile like this. And you see that all over Facebook. You'll see people acting like they're happy, but they smile like that. And you know this person's sad. Because that's not a happy smile. A real smile involves the whole face. A real smile is more like, you know, it crinkles up the eyes. It moves the cheeks upward. And there's also the overall body language will change. What about eyes getting real big and head shaking with the words "I never"? We're going to get to that too. A lot of times there is a lot of emphatic language. We're not quite there yet, but we're going to talk about that too. Now, it doesn't always mean that people are necessarily being deceitful in their words, but a smile that doesn't get to the eyes, it's not a sincere smile. They're either hiding something or they're trying to seem happy when they're not. And a lot of times their gestures and expressions are not going to match their statements. For example, like I said, when a person smiles when it's really not appropriate, that may signal what some people call duping delight. They can't help but smile because they think they're about to get away with it. And you'll see this smile get on their face because they think they're about to get you. So watch for smiles that don't fit the conversation. Because the truth is, for a lot of liars, pulling off a lie is a thrill. That's why people used to say, "Look me in the eye," and say that. The reason they would say that, see, people think it's just to see if they'll look you in the eye and whether they look away or not. For some people, they can't maintain eye contact when they're lying. But good liars, skilled liars, can maintain eye contact when they lie. Here's the thing that they can't control. When you lie, your pupils will dilate. You can't help that. It is involuntary. So that's why you look someone in the eye. Yeah, their pupils dilate while they're telling you something. They're probably lying. I remember years ago, someone tried to sell me a used BMW. And he smiled a lot, even at times when he seemed sincere at first, but I got under the car and I discovered an oil leak. And he pretended to be unaware of the problem. And But the smile of duping delight crept through his facade and his practiced looks of sincerity. And so I didn't buy the car because I knew there were going to be other problems. In my days as a salesman, I often saw the same sort of smile on the face of managers who would falsify information to avoid paying out commissions. Not surprisingly, the leadership of that company was actually prosecuted for fraud. They did it to everybody, including the bankers. And you don't do that to the bankers. The bankers will get you. Now, interactions and reactions. There's an ancient proverb that says, and it's from the book of Proverbs, the guilty flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion. Likewise, a lot of times people who are being deceptive will often get defensive before they're even challenged. You might just be asking a question. You're not even trying to imply that they're lying to you. You're just asking a question. But because they're so defensive, they might even get angry. The innocent, on the other hand, tend to go on the offensive. A liar may also become uncomfortable and turn their face or their body away from you. They won't even notice they're doing that most of the time. Some will go so far as to put an object between you and themselves, like I said about the cup of coffee during police interrogations. And the styrofoam cup of coffee doesn't really offer any real protection, but it's a visual barrier. And then, like I said, they're not conscious that they're doing that. In a business setting, this may not necessarily point to outright deceit, but it can indicate that something isn't quite right. Whether it's insecurity, mistrust, resentment, boredom, or any number of things, this cue, when observed with other cues that we're discussing, can give you a great deal of insight about who you're dealing with. Another thing to look at is verbal context and content. Liars will tend to use your words to construct both answers and questions. They'll try to mirror what you're saying. Sometimes a truthful person will do this, but so this by itself is not necessarily an indicator of deception. But when it comes to some of the other indicators we mentioned, when it happens with those other indicators, the probability is above 90%. Statements made with contradictions or with contractions rather, are more likely to be truthful. Especially if someone normally speaks with contractions and they suddenly stop using contractions. Give you an example. A very famous lie is Bill Clinton. He said, read my lips, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. And that was how he said it, very emphatically. And he didn't talk like that. Bill was very country. He's from Arkansas. He wouldn't say, I did not. He would say, I didn't. But all of a sudden, his contractions are gone. He's not speaking naturally, at least not naturally for him. And then all of a sudden, this woman that he called Monica every day is suddenly that woman. Liars also like to use distancing language. Instead of Monica, she is now that woman, Miss Lewinsky. That creates some distance between him and her. Being more formal, and guess what did we find out? He was lying. Liars also tend to imply answers rather than state them outright, and frequently they will refuse to give straight answers to direct questions. So that's something to watch out for when you're dealing with people, especially when what's at stake is your destiny, the calling of God on your life. Watch out for people who don't give straight answers. If they're being evasive, something is wrong. When I deal with that kind of person who's being evasive and they don't want to give straight answers, if it's on the phone, I'll ask them if they mind if I record the conversation. Liars almost always become angry or tense or nervous at that idea. If they say they don't want to be recorded, I know I can't trust them. I'm not saying you got to record every conversation, but if it's something really important that's on the phone, you're better off recording it. Now, you can't record it without their consent, but if they don't want to consent to it being recorded, that can point to possible deception on their part. They're trying to avoid accountability. And an honest man never fears accountability. Liars may also speak more than is natural. They might add unnecessary details. They tend to be uncomfortable with silence or pauses. And so when I'm dealing with someone I think is lying, what I will do is I'll pause quite a bit on purpose. I'll slow down the pace of the conversation because I know if they're lying to me, they're going to be uncomfortable with that. They will also avoid personal pronouns. as part of the distancing language that tends to take over during willful deceit, and their voice will tend toward monotone. And on the other hand, truthful statements tend to emphasize pronouns as much or more. They'll try to avoid using their personal pronouns. They won't say my car, they'll say the car, that car. So, if this was your car yesterday you would have said this is my car, but you're saying the car. That's when you combine it with all those other indicators, it points out that something might be wrong, or they're leaving something out. Because sometimes people aren't always necessarily directly lying or overtly lying. Sometimes they're just leaving out materially important information. I remember when I was a stockbroker, it was a crime to leave out materially relevant information. If you were trying to talk somebody into an investment and you knew something that could influence their decision and you left it out of the conversation, if you got caught, you could go to prison. Of course, now they have the Merrill Lynch rule, where all you have to say at the beginning of the conversation is our interest and your interest may not necessarily be the same, and then you can pretty much do whatever you want, as long as you're not too overt about it. Anyhow, eye movements and deception. Now, another thing I do with people is if it's in person, I tend to watch their eyes while they speak, because as the saying goes, the eyes are the windows of the soul. And when a person's eyes move upward and to the right, if they're right-handed that is, it's usually an indicator of a visually constructed image. It doesn't necessarily mean they're lying, but it does mean that they're being creative. They're trying to come up with something. Eyes which move upward and to the left indicate a visually remembered image. It's the opposite for left-handed people. Now, eyes that move to the left on a horizontal plane are indicative of an auditory constructed statement. So they're thinking of something that is auditory, something that's heard, but they're constructing it. Eyes that move to the right on the level plane will indicate auditory remembered information. They're remembering something they heard. When their eyes move down and to the left, this usually indicates a kinesthetic memory, like they're remembering something they felt. If they move downward and to the right, that points to an internal dialogue. So they're kind of talking to themselves when they do that. Now, this is not, of course, this is not all inclusive. For left-handed people, like I said, the eye movement stuff is the opposite. Eyes that stare ahead, that are unfocused or unmoving, will usually indicate visual accessing. They're thinking of something visual. While these characteristics don't necessarily indicate deceit by themselves, like I said before, when these different things occur in clusters, your probability of deception is really high. If they're doing like 7 or 8 of these different things at the same time, you're dealing with a liar. Now, another thing I've learned to do with dealing with people that I suspect of deceit is to suddenly change the subject. I'll do that on purpose. And it confuses them. Now, an honest person, or at least if you're honest, it will confuse you. An honest person will be confused by the sudden shift of subject, and they want to come back to the original topic. I've had this done to me. When I first came to Canada, they stopped me at the border because they saw Texas plates, and of course they think you got guns and stuff. So they stopped me, they searched my car, they even damaged my car during the search. And then they interrogated me. They held me for about 4 hours, and they interrogated me for at least like an hour and a half or 2 hours. And they, at certain points in the interview, they kept changing the subject. And it bothered me, it confused me. I wanted to get back to the original subject. I said, hey, stop changing the subject. We were talking about this. And I didn't realize what they were doing was they were testing me to see if I was lying. Because a dishonest person won't mind that you change the subject. They want you to change the subject because they're uncomfortable. A person who's telling the truth doesn't want to change the subject because they want to deal with this thing. And so an honest person will be confused by the sudden shift and they want to get back to the original topic. The guilty, on the other hand, will usually be relieved and they'll follow along with the change of subject quite willingly. They're glad the subject has changed. Another book that, there's a book, a couple of books you might want to read on this subject. One is called Lie Spotting. The other one is called Frogs into Princes. I'm not a believer in neuro-linguistic programming, but some of the things they say are astute observations of human behavior. So you have to not just rely on the power of truth and being truthful to maximize your opportunities for your destiny. But you also have to be able to quickly discern when you're being lied to. Because if you don't, people are going to waste your time. And I don't know about you, but I don't have another 10 years to waste. I certainly don't have another 20 years to waste. Ain't nobody got time for that. And one of the things I've learned over the years, is you may not be able to trust everyone you meet, but the truth will help you meet people you can trust. And that having been said, uh, that's it for this week on Learn to Trust the Truth Part 2. Next week we're going to continue, and we're going to discuss something I call giving yourself permission. Because to walk in your destiny, to some extent, you got to give yourself permission. A lot of us were held back because we refuse to move on. We refuse to move forward. We either think we're unworthy, or we think we're unable, or we got all this emotional baggage, all this mental baggage, all these beliefs that we have that we think are true, that are actually stopping us from living to the potential that God put in us. And that having been said, I hope this was useful. I hope this was helpful. And so, folks, that's it for this week. Meanwhile, God bless you and God keep you. Brother Sam signing out.